Good afternoon. How are we doing tonight today? Excellent. That's great. So this is the top 10 Active Directory security issues, impact and remediation. I'm Sean Metcalf. I'm the founder of Trimarc, a security company. We help organizations better secure their Microsoft platform on-prem and in the cloud. I'm a Microsoft certified master in Active Directory, as well as an MVP, and I've spoken at a number of security conferences, first time at Ignite. So thank you very much for being here with me. What is it that attackers really require? Well, it comes down to three things. One, they need the account, the credentials. Then they need rights, and they need the access, the ability to get to that resource. And if we as defenders, as blue teamers, as operations people, can set up barriers, or if we can limit this so that they can't get all three of these things, then their attack is not going to be successful. In short, we have the ability to control what attackers can do in our environment. It is our home base. We want to set up barriers. We want to set up tripwires. So when they're doing things, we know what's happening. So the big question is, do I need domain admin as an attacker? Absolutely not. Attackers do not need domain admin. They can do a ton of things without domain admin. Why is this? Well, because over time, we have set up our environments with GPO permissions, AD permissions, we have group nesting all over the place, over-permissioned accounts, service accounts that have way too much access, Kerberos Delegation where there's hundreds of accounts that have the ability to impersonate users, password vaults that have highly privileged credentials and aren't well protected, and then backups. We back up our Active Directory, right? We have backups of our domain controllers. How are we protecting those? Are they protected like a domain controller? Well, probably not. But in the real world, rights are everywhere. We have server admins with rights to all our servers. We have workstation admins with rights to all of our workstations. We have help desk accounts that have full rights on our workstations and other systems. Attackers don't need domain admins because they can take advantage of these things. There's also temporary admin accounts. What does temporary mean? It's going to be there until someone remembers. Someone remembers to pull it out, clean it up later on, but everyone's busy, so it's forgotten about. And then there's the third-party products. There's a lot of them here. Hopefully, when you talk to vendors, you're saying, what are the rights you actually require? I've read through a lot of vendor documentation, and I found that these are about the things that they want. And here we are in the world of magic, of Disney, so let's figure out if we can do some magic and see if a pattern emerges. There it is. I don't know if you can see it too, but basically they all want domain admin, right? All the vendors want domain admins because it makes it easier for them. So push back on your vendors and say, I need to know what rights you need. Not domain admins, that's not a requirement, that's a request. So we need to work through these things and figure out what they are. So let's talk about some of the most common AD security issues that we see at Trimarc when we're doing Active Directory security assessments. We find some really interesting things. Well, local admin accounts. These are the accounts that when we build our workstations, that's the first admin account, a password that gets placed on it. And it's across all the workstations, and maybe even all the servers in the environment, which means all an attacker needs to do is get admin rights on one of them, run Mimikatz, dump those credentials, and the problem with the whole local account thing is local is very much a misnomer. It's not really local. Because if you have one computer here with the same local admin account and password as you do over here, I can jump from this computer over to the other one with the same credentials and it works. So what does this mean? This means that we need to ensure that we mitigate this by keeping all of these account passwords different across our organization. Every single system needs to have a unique password, otherwise attackers can take advantage of this situation. So something like Microsoft Local Admin Password Solution, which is free, works very well, LAPS, it's like the easy button for solving this problem. Highly recommend it. Domain password policy. 7 characters is the AD default. That's a problem today in 2019. Why is this a problem? Because there's this thing called password spraying, where attackers drop into the environment and they take a list of most commonly used passwords. They're going to try one of those passwords against every user account, and admin account, and service account in your environment. And guess what? If you're using keyboard walking passwords by just going, QWERTY 1 2 3 4 5 6, they know this. Those are passwords they check. They're going to compromise your service account if you're using that. So they'll try one password against all of them, then they'll move on to the next one after sleeping for a little while. Because why? We don't want to lock out any accounts. And Sean, we have to use special characters. Okay, done, right? That's probably going to work in a lot of environments, and based on my conversations with pen testers and red teamers, this is how they get access to the environments. Okay, so now we need to change it, because the shorter passwords mean more effective password spraying. Attackers know this, they leverage this environment. It can be very difficult to detect this if you don't have proper auditing configured, which I'll talk about in a minute. So in some environments, we've seen that they've increased the size of this password length to maybe even 8 characters or 10. It doesn't really solve the problem. Really, we want to get it up to 12 or 15 characters and use fine-grained password policies for admins and service account passwords, because that way we can enforce better, longer passwords. If you use fine-grained password policies, it overrides what the domain password policy is. So if you have a certain group of users that use mainframes, they have to have 7-character, 8-character passwords, configure them with a fine-grained password policy that says 7 or 8 characters. But set the domain password policy to be that broader one, like 12 to 15. And then Azure AD Password Protection, don't like the name, because it's actually for on-prem AD, but this will enable you to prevent users from using really bad passwords in your environment. And there's a session about this on Friday with Mark Morrow. Default domain administrator accounts. These should never be service accounts. We find this all the time, way too often. An account with a service principal name for Kerberos authentication is a service account. So an account with a SPIN is configured as such so that SPIN associates this account with that service that's running on your server. And that's how Kerberos authentication works initially. You authenticate, you get your authentication ticket, your TGT, and then you request a service ticket for a Kerberos SPIN. That SPIN is associated with the account, and then that service ticket is generated and encrypted with the password hash of that service account if the attacker actually requests a RC4 encrypted Kerberos service ticket. This is called Kerberosting. We can do this as a user. So if we find that an admin account has a SPIN, I can request a service ticket for it using Kerberos RC4 encryption. I take that ticket, take it offline, and I can run some cracking against it by taking my password list, run that through an NTLM function, and then attempt to open up that service ticket. When I open up that service ticket, I have guessed that password as a user in AD. So why does this matter? We don't want accounts that have SPINs in privileged Active Directory groups. Another part of this is really old passwords. I don't know why, but it seems like the default administrator account is often forgotten about. 14 years, 15 years, 19 years, 10 years, that's a problem. And you see these service accounts here that have old passwords? Those probably have SPINs as well. I know the AGPM one does, SCCM does. I don't know why VMware would ever need domain admin rights, but okay. So this is a problem. If these passwords don't change, the attacker can password spray them and probably guess what they are. Because I don't know about you, but my passwords from 10 years ago were pretty bad. Hopefully they're much better today. But a password that was set maybe when AD was created is going to be awful. So service accounts and domain admins, again, rarely ever does a service account need to be in domain admins. Domain admins gives full local admin rights on all workstations, all servers, all domain controllers, and Active Directory itself. There really should be no reason for one account to have all of those rights today. So when you look at this here, I have the vulnerability scanner account listed here. I'm not going to ask anyone to raise any hands, but I'm pretty sure most people have a vulnerability scanner. And most of the vendors say, put it in domain admins. One account, domain admins, right? Because it works. The problem here is that we're scanning all of our systems, our workstations, and our domain controllers. It's kind of a problem to me, because what if that vulnerability scanner hiccups and leaves that credential behind on a workstation or on a server? If an attacker has access or control of that system, they now have the domain admin account. I'm going to talk about Kerberos delegation in a little bit, but unconstrained delegation enables an attacker to actually get that TGT, that proof of identity, from that system that authenticates to it over Kerberos. So when this vulnerability scanning account is scanning everything, it could be an inventory system as well. As it's scanning everything, it uses Kerberos authentication to authenticate to that system. Guess what's going to happen? If that system has unconstrained delegation, that ticket, that Kerberos proof of identity is going to be left behind on that system. KRBTGT, one of the most misunderstood accounts in Active Directory. It is disabled. The only thing this account is used for is Kerberos Tickets. The domain controller, when you authenticate, is going to give you a TGT. You cannot open it. It is encrypted with the TGT account password hash. The service ticket, its pack where it stores the group membership information and other sensitive information is signed by the KRBTGT password hash, as is the TGT. So the KRBTGT is a very sensitive account in your Active Directory environment, because if anyone could guess or gather the information about what that password hash is, then they can create and forge Kerberos tickets, often referred to as golden tickets. So the problem here is, remember I was talking about backups, are they well protected? If an attacker could gain access to that backup. Or, oftentimes when we're building a domain controller, we use what? An IFM, an install from media set, which is effectively a backup of the ntds.dit and the appropriate registry keys. If an attacker gains access to the IFM set, they can extract the KRBTGT and then can create golden tickets and persist forever in this environment. And I just was talking about Kerberosing. Apparently, if you have a very old environment with Windows 2000 servers, it's possible that the KRBTGT password did not change when you changed it or when you set it. It could be 3 characters. It could be 8 characters. So you want to check your KRBTGT account to see when the password last changed. If it was 2000, 2001, 2002, maybe even 2003, it's time to start changing that. Just about every security guidance, including the US DoD STIG, says that this must change twice every year. Why twice? The KRBTGT account is interesting because there are 2 passwords associated with it, the current one and the previous one. That's because it enables the domain controllers to open up Kerberos tickets that were created and encrypted and signed with the older version of that password. So it has to be changed twice to mitigate against this sort of attack. Domain controllers need to have proper auditing. Oftentimes, from what we find, standard auditing is still enabled on domain controllers. What this means is you're missing a lot of the granular audits and audit policy settings that are available since 2008. What year is it again? It's been 11 years. These have been around for 11 years. It takes us from 9 categories to 52 categories. We can monitor Kerberos authentications. We can detect some of these types of attacks that I'm talking about. Some of the types of attacks that are very prevalent and common in modern environments. And even if you've set your advanced audit policy settings at a setting options that you like and think are good, you have to enable this setting here, forced audit policy subcategories. Otherwise, it may just stick with those original standard auditing settings. This one annoys me, and I'll tell you why. Server GPOs that are linked to the server OU and the domain controller's OU. Well, why is that a problem, Sean? It's a problem because anything that you configure or set or change in that server GPO is also going to apply to your domain controllers. This means that if you're using restricted groups to add something like server admins to that administrators group on all those servers, it's also going to apply to your domain controllers. Well, domain controllers don't have a local administrators group, so what ends up happening is that it actually updates the administrators group for the Active Directory domain. That's just part of this. We have seen this. Part of this is that issue. The other part is if someone changes these settings because they're having a problem with the server policy or the server applications aren't working, so they reduce the security of it, it's affecting domain controllers. We don't want that. We want separate group policies for domain controllers, so that way we can control the domain controllers themselves. We don't want to cross-link things from one site, one OU with other servers to domain controllers. And one of these reasons is, who has modify rights to these GPOs. We want to make sure that any GPOs linked to the domain or the domain controller's OU is only controlled by Active Directory admins. Because GPOs can install code, run code, change security settings, update the local membership of the local groups, and has a lot of power within this environment. I can install malware through a GPO that's configured for all of the computers in the environment by controlling that GPO. Permissions are a big one. And you see this one here? I didn't make that up. Domain computers have full control on all user objects in the domain. That means as an attacker, I compromise one computer to then compromise all accounts in the environment, which could include a server account the server admin account that I just mentioned that had the ability to modify that GPO. Or the server admins group has the ability to modify all computer objects in the environment. Well, now, the domain computers, while accounts, are not going to be able to modify the membership of domain admins because SD-Prop will protect that. Well, we've also seen it where SD-Prop has actually been modified itself, where user admins can control all objects, all attributes. What this means is, all I have to do as an attacker is compromise one of the accounts that's in user admins. And once I do that, then I can take over domain admins, enterprise admins, administrators, and any of the accounts that are members of that. One of the biggest issues we have today is admins are still using regular workstations for AD administration. Why is this a problem? It's a problem because when you type in your credentials on that keyboard, an attacker could pull it through a keylogger or through a screenshots type system. But they'd have to get access to it. Well, let's talk about, we have one workstation. There are 30 accounts in local administrators group, 50 accounts with local admin rights through the software management system, 20 accounts with control of the computer via security agents. That means there's 100 accounts with effective admin rights on this workstation. We don't have positive control of our workstations in most environments. What this means is we also cannot type in our credentials that are highly privileged AD admin accounts in these environments where the workstations have this many people that have control of it. Even, again, if you're RDPing to your admin server from your regular workstation, all I have to do is set up a WMI task to monitor for mstsc.exe for when you open up RDP. I can then keylog that and pull the credentials for that account. There's GPOs that apply to this as well, so it expands even further. Who can modify that? Because ultimately, we need to know who has control of the workstation. I mentioned Kerberos delegation. Delegation is impersonation. This is the ability to impersonate users in the Active Directory domain. Unconstrained delegation is what I'm going to focus on. It's from 2000, we need to get rid of it. Constrained delegation actually constrains and restricts the ability of that delegated ticket. Unconstrained delegation, as I mentioned, means that when you authenticate to a server on the network, it has your proof of identity, your TGT. So the only way we can protect against this realistically, all admin accounts should have this box checked. Account is sensitive and cannot be delegated. All of your AD admin accounts need to be a member of protected users, which protects against delegation attacks as well as hardening up the authentication process. Azure AD Connect. Well, this is a Microsoft conference. I'm pretty sure most people here have Office 365. You probably have Azure AD Connect. If you ran Express install, it delegated the permissions for the Azure AD Connect service account, which it created to have these two rights. And I talked about this at DEF CON a couple years ago. This means that it can pull password hashes. Mimikatz has capability called DC Sync, which does the same thing. So if an attacker can compromise your server that's running your Azure AD Connect system, they can either monitor memory, where those password hashes are being pulled natively by Azure AD Connect, or even better, extract the password of that account from that system and then jump off to another system on the network and use that because that password's not going to change. What this means is we need to protect our Azure AD Connect server like a domain controller. And so one bonus, there's accounts with lots of delegated rights to Active Directory. Through group membership, delegated permissions, group policy. This is real. Allow logon locally, this is from a default domain controller's policy, where server tier 3 had the ability to log on locally and log on via RDP, but then domain users could log on to domain controllers. I don't know. Maybe so that way the systems could be rebooted on the weekend or something. I don't know. Last person out reboots the DC. This is a problem because it's not just local on the console. All the attacker needs is to be able to get to ILO or to get to the VMware console. And then they're local on that domain controller. So there's a number of things you can do to help tighten up your Active Directory pretty quickly just by handling some of these easy, low-hanging fruit type items. So thank you to Quest. I will be over at the Quest booth for Q&A immediately following this session. Stop by and ask me anything, Active Directory and Azure AD security. That's been my time. Thank you very much for yours. There's also evals here. Thank you.